spotlight everybody. We have today Ashley Soto, who is a television writer, series writer. How you doing today?
Good. How are you?
Good. Let's jump into some questions. First and foremost, where you from?
I'm from El Paso, Texas. It's on the
Okay.
border of New Mexico and Mexico.
So what got you started in wanting to be in entertainment and television?
It wasn't intentional at first. When I went to college in Massachusetts, I went from an ethnic enclave to like a PWI, predominantly white institution, and it was a culture shock. And I and I just remember feeling like I didn't belong, to be put it frankly. And so
Really?
when I left, yeah. And so when I left
Okay.
college, I decided I would be a teacher, a high school teacher in underserved areas, and similar to the ones that I'm from, so that if there was ever a student who wanted to go to a college like I did, I went to Amherst College in Massachusetts, it wouldn't be this sort of like abstract notion. It would be like, oh, Miss Soto did that, I can do that too. And so I
Nice.
became a high school teacher. I majored in neuroscience, and so I taught high school science in Mississippi for 2 years. And Mississippi, and I went to Ole Miss for grad school, and I have a master's in education. And so when I was in Mississippi, it became pretty clear that teaching was not my calling.
Hold on, wait a minute. Like, what happened?
The kids are great. It's everyone else. It's not cut
Okay.
out for it. I lived alone, so I didn't have family, and nobody was cooking, home cooked meals. Like I had to cook them for myself. I had just graduated college, so I was like still learning how to adult. And then I was 21 when I graduated college, so I had 20-year-old students, and so I had to be the adult in the situation when like I was still very much a kid in a lot of
Right.
respects. And so it was just a hard place to live. It's, Mississippi is very, they have their issues that they're very open about, for better or for worse. And, I have
Yeah.
a lot of respect for the state from afar, but as but wasn't going to lay down roots there. I needed to sort of reshape how I was going to serve the communities that I set out to serve.
Okay.
And so I started to think about impact and doing it on a bigger scale, a larger scale.
Mhm.
As a teacher, I was one person serving 300 students, and doing that it was spread very thinly. And so I could only do so much.
Yeah.
And grading is the worst thing on earth. And there are just so many things about teaching that I just was not cut out for.
Wow.
And so I started thinking about impact. And I fell into marketing, and I thought, oh, this is perfect, because
Hmm.
marketing, you can reach a large audience, you can have instant impact. And wouldn't it be nice to have a billboard with black and brown faces that became normalized so much that it became white noise, that like it was just so normal, we ourselves represented, that we didn't
Dope.
need this sort of like confidence boost, because we
Right.
knew that we belonged. But when I was in marketing, I learned pretty quickly that I don't control the narrative. My job is to find there's a brand, and they have a product that they're pushing. And so your job is to find the audience and push their brand message, and so that they can ultimately, sell their product. So I didn't get to control any of that messaging. It was just given to me, and it was just like, here, find the people, find the
Right.
black and brown people to sell this to. And so it was like very much out of my control. And I was like, okay, well, I'm making impact for this brand, but how am I going to make impact and sort of reshape narratives? And I was like, oh, writers do that, obviously, like that's what writers do. And
Mhm.
so
Yeah.
when I moved to LA, I was never thinking like, oh, I'm going to go into like the entertainment industry. It was like very naive into like, duh, you're in the entertainment mecca of the world, like this is where
Yeah.
people go. Once I learned and knew that was what I was going to do, or at least what I was interested in doing as an avenue in order to serve communities and sort of reshape narratives and create belonging, I started taking writing classes. So I took classes at the Writing Pad. Here in LA, they have online classes as well. And I just I took the class. I didn't have an agenda necessarily. I knew I was interested in it, but I didn't like go in thinking like, oh, this is going to get me a job and this and that. It was just like exploring a curiosity that I had based on a notion that or like an instinct that I had that like this would be a path that I could like be better suited at, and also like provide the impact that I was hoping to have. So I took the class, and one thing led to another, and I like my writing teacher, he wrote The Wedding Planner with J-Lo, and so he was like the first sort of person I knew in the industry. And so when I was so I like took that class, and then I got into the National Hispanic Media Coalition. They have a TV writers program sponsored by ABC and NBC, and so I got into that program. And in that program, you write a pilot in 6 weeks, and the expectation isn't that they're teaching you anything; it's that you already know how to do it. And this is just like a crash, like a master, not even a course. It's just like it's a fellowship. So like you're there with 9 other writers who are all doing the same thing. They all have the same goal, is to be hired to do this professionally. And so I wrote a pilot in that class, and that pilot, 37 drafts later is the pilot that, or not that class, excuse me, in that fellowship, 37 drafts later is still the sample that has gotten me all my jobs. I've written many scripts, but there's this, they always talk about like, oh, there's always that one script, and I guess that's my one script as of right now. I mean, it's been 3 writing jobs so far, and so that script has gotten me 3 jobs. But and of course I always like to remind people that like the script itself, like it has to speak for itself, like it has to showcase your ability, but that writing, that sample is what gets you the meeting, to show them that like that how to pitch something, that you pitch an idea, or in a comedy room how to pitch a joke. If you're and if you're interviewing for a writing gig, like you have to think about the fact about like how writers' rooms are structured. So the National Hispanic Media Coalition, the TV Writers Fellowship, it's a 6-week fellowship, and you write a pilot in that 6 weeks. And so maybe the first week you spend learning how to brand yourself as a writer, and also figuring out pitching the ideas that you have. You have to come with like 3 ideas, and you're pitching all the other writers in the room, and then the person who's like overseeing the program, and you sort of have to try to sell your ideas, and then together you decide amongst yourselves like which one feels like it has the most legs, which one's based on this group, do you think is gonna help are the other writers better suited to help you, because they want to help you get to your vision, because everybody's giving each other notes. It sometimes helps if there's content that other people identify with or have experience with, because then they can give you more specific notes. Things like that. And so like the first week is like you're pitching. The second and third week you're like outlining. The 4th week, I think you go home for a draft, and you come back and you do table reads. And then the last week they'll have like executives come and listen. Like not everybody gets a table read. I didn't. 2 of the writers, we voted on who the 2 writers would get like their script like table read for the ears of ABC executives. And so we did those, and then. But we don't hire actors or anything like that. So we, as the other writers, are the ones that are like reading it out. Like we are the actors for the day. We're reading the scripts.
And you said you're still using the one that you came up with that class. You're still using that to this day to get other gigs?
That, a version of that. So like the first draft I wrote there, it's gone through like 37 different drafts. I had maybe 10 drafts, and I thought 10 drafts was a lot. And I got a meeting through that program. I got the meeting with the VP of comedy of ABC. And she agreed to meet with everyone in the program. And she would read our script, and she would give us notes. And when she gave me her notes, they were like really on point and spot on, but I had to do like a significant number of changes in order to really sell the story that I was trying to sell in a more figurative sense, not literally for money, but like sort of tell the story that I was hoping to tell. And so then it went for another like 10 drafts later after that. And then but I think that particular, that note session was really pivotal. And she gave me like some notes that like, she was like, I'll give you like a synopsis. It's a dramedy. It's a cable half hour sample. It's called Sellout. It's about an ethnically ambiguous marketing professional who sells out in order to secure quality health care for her schizophrenic mother. So it's not autobiographical, but it's certainly uh, I certainly draw from my own experience. My grandma had schizophrenia. There's a lot of mental illness in my family, so I grew up around that. And then obviously, like I worked in marketing, and so her feedback was like, well, here's the thing, you have created such a heightened reality in this script that when I read it, I don't know what's real and what isn't. Like, if you bring down the heightened portions of that, we can tell what is like actual, like, you know, like kind of exciting or sort of jarring moments in this character's reality versus like this is normal in their world because everything is so heightened. And I think that note, like, even was just helpful for me to sort of restructure the way that I wrote it and sort of allow it to be more accessible to readers, because it's all people of color in the cast, or at least the characters that I created, or the majority are people of color. And so a lot of that, with that comes a lot of like slang and nuance that, like, most of the readers in Hollywood may not be privy to. And so it was sort of a lesson in, like, obviously write what you want to write and tell the stories you want to tell, but also remember that, like, there are going to be readers who aren't going to have the cultural currency that you have. And so that version went through like another 10 drafts, and then fast forward, a mentor of mine who ultimately recommended me for one of my first jobs, she also read it and gave me notes. So every step of the way, there's been someone pivotal who's like, I've trusted and who has experience in the industry and working with this content, who was able to give me some really specific notes that was able to improve the drafts. And then ultimately, once they're submitted, that gets me the meeting. And then,
you just moved to LA, El Paso. So how did you know these people?
So one of the women who had given me feedback, she was a speaker in the class.
Okay.
Or not in the class, in the fellowship. She came and spoke and I was just like very impressed by her. We had so many, speakers come in, and I was just impressed by all of them, to be honest. But like, she really stood out because she was a woman of color. She'd gone up the ranks in comedy rooms. She had like a career that I aspired to, and she was like normal and nice, which is like one of the most important things, like valuable things you can ever have in like any sort of coworker. If you're normal and nice, it's great. Like, that's all I want. So she had, these things that I like really admired. And so I asked the person who oversaw the program, hey, can you make an introduction? But then it was like silent for like ever. He reached out to her, and like nothing happened, which was fine. But like when she came and spoke to our group, I followed her on Instagram and she followed me back. So even though I didn't get the introduction necessarily that I had asked for, we'd been following each other for almost a year at that point, and laughing at each other and like that, and just having casual sort of like, haha, that's hilarious, whatever. And then fast forward, let's say the program, the National Hispanic Media Coalition TV Writers Program is in October. Fast forward to the May or June that followed, and NHMC, that program again, they contacted me. It was like a really cryptic like communication, like, DreamWorks wants your script or whatever, something like, this is what you have to do, send me an email, say your name, give me a bio, and just attach your script, and then I'm just gonna forward your email to the DreamWorks people. It was just like very like, you have to do it this way or it's not gonna happen. So like, all right, okay, we do this. So then fast forward, I get another cryptic email. Hi, and it was the writer's assistant for the show. Hi, we are interested in meeting with you. And I still didn't know what show it was. I didn't know anything. I didn't know, like, I had no clue about what it was. And then finally, when I met with them, it was for Fast and Furious Spy Racers on Netflix. And so I sent that script that had gotten, enough notes or whatever. But and I got that, and I got a freelance script on that show. But what I did, when you celebrate once it actually happens. And so I posted, and so I think that kind of helped my like mentor to be like, oh, okay, like I can help her now. Cause it's one thing to say there's this newbie writer, like who's never written anything or never gotten paid for anything, versus like, oh, she's written for Fast and Furious spy racers.
Right.
Like that gives her some, like, that helps her help me.
Got it.
So that was when she was like, hey, you want to get coffee? Like, I know we were supposed to do that a long time ago, but you want to do it now? I was like, okay, like, so it wasn't that she didn't want to. It was just like, it was almost like me. I had to read between the lines. Like, she couldn't help me at that time because I had nothing to show for myself in that sense.
Got you. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so now that I had like this freelance episode with Fast and Furious under my belt, then my cousin's here. Hi, Alan. Once I had the script under my belt, she could then be like, hey, there's this up and coming writer. She's like normal and nice, which again, the most important thing you can be in this industry is normal and nice. And I really like her writing, et cetera, et cetera. And even that was its own process. Like when we met, she was like, look, I'll read your stuff. I have to like it. If I don't like it, I'm not going to stick my neck out for you. And so I lucked out that she was like, she liked it enough that she stuck her neck out for me. And she called or emailed or, stuck her neck out for me for like 5 different shows. And then eventually, one of those shows was for Vida on Stars, and so I met with the showrunner, and then I stopped on that show. So just getting the mentor that I did ultimately get was like a whole, like, it was years in the making.
Okay, so give me a synopsis of like your daily, what how your process is.
We all have to pitch, we all have to talk, we all have to contribute, and we all contribute to every episode, and we write it together in the room. And so like obviously everyone has an episode or more than one episode assigned to them, and so when it's time to go off to script, they will go off to script. But by that point, we've already broken the story in the room together, we've already written the outline in the room together, so most of the jokes are already written in. There are some shows where the outlines are much they're like very broad strokes. Like when I did the Fast and Furious episode, it was like I had a beat sheet and I had to go write the outline on my own, and then I came back, they gave me notes, they rewrite even, and then I went off on my own to write that script. For the Proud Family room, it's not like that at all. We do everything together. The only thing that we don't do is like when the writer has to go off and write the script, but by that point they literally are it's almost like they're formatting the outline into a script form, and if they see any inconsistencies, they'll add their own adjustments to that. But at that point, like, the script is written, and so everyone pitches a joke. Like their scripts we're working on now that it doesn't have my written by on it, but like I have several jokes in there with.
Where do you start getting your funny from? And because that seems like that's a lot of the genre that you're in, it kind of comes natural. Does it start to kind of be more of like a just second nature, or do you have to research other shows?
If you're writing on a comedy, you have to be funny. I like that. I don't know if that can be taught. Like there's like sort of rules of like there's the rule of threes, things like that. What I will say though, that I think has really helped me, and I think I see it a lot more in this room where we write the dialogue, we pitch jokes, and the dialogue is crafted in the room. Is that my dad was a Latin percussionist, and I am classically trained in piano, and like we're all like musicians in our family, and so a lot of dialogue and especially with comedy, is about timing and rhythm, and like our showrunner spends a lot of time like that's not the rhythm. I'm like, oh, that must be why like I can like play with dialogue, well, a little, I guess, with a lot more ease, is because I have like the music background. That's just the one that's how I've like intellectualized it. Like I don't know how I learned how to tell a joke, but like I think that has helped.
Is it more or less you're working by the show or by the series, and then when that series is over or a new season, are you constantly getting rehired? Is that kind of how it works as far as?
So it varies by show. So like this series is new, and so like if I'm asked back, assuming like everything goes well, a lot of it is like if you're normal and nice, like typically like and you get along, everybody gets along with each other, the showrunner will want you back, and so like then you'll get asked back for the next season and continue getting asked back if like you are an asset and valuable to the room, and you don't like create problems. And so that's a lot of how like getting hired and rehired works. There's no like rhyme or reason on how to like get on a show. Like I said, I was recommended for both this show and the last show I was on. The first show, it was like this cryptic email that I didn't know. Like, so I couldn't tell you that there's no like database where it's like, here, apply for this show. Granted, the WGA does have a database now that you can submit yourself. But like it's so new that it's unclear how like effective it's been for writers in terms of getting jobs. But a lot of it is relationships and building those relationships and people being willing to stick their neck out for you and be like, oh, Ashley's great. Here, consider her, because a recommendation is also like putting their reputation on the line, and like
Right.
you don't want to do that if you don't trust the writer that you're recommending.
Are you able to do more than one show at a time, meaning contractually and just workload wise?
It depends, I think, based on like your sort of rank. As a staff writer, it's built into my contract that I can't do anything that conflicts with.
Gotcha.
Technically, I could, work on my own things off, after hours. I could, if something were to come up, it can't interfere with my job. So I will have to, if I wanted to pitch a show as an example, like, and let's say I sold it, like it can't interfere with my job. So I still have to get permission and like let them know, like, hey, I'm doing this. Like it does happen where you're on two shows at once, but it's not like common.
What's the time, what you would say, for a new writer to seek representation from like a literary agent?
You need to have at least 2 samples that are like your best samples. Like you may have written like 10 scripts, but there's 2 that stand out above the crowd that are like really exceptional. And a lot of times if it's validated by a competition, that helps, like by Austin Film Festival for Women, the Break screenwriting competition, Sundance, like any of those help. I know people who have gotten into fellowships, like the ABC program, NBC Writers on the Verge. A lot of those programs actually like help you meet managers and agents, because like you're already like, you have like a stamp of approval. Like this person is at least good enough that they got into this program, and they're at least a good enough writer. So programs like that and competitions really help legitimize you, because no manager or agent just wants to take a chance on you without having some other form of legitimacy, unless like you're just undeniable. So we use Final Draft, and so in the room when we're writing the outlines, we'll use Word, so it's not so a Word document is fine too when you're doing your up to the outline. In terms of like how the practice of writing, we'll start in the room. Typically we'll pitch ideas to the showrunner, sometimes for an episode, and he'll be like, okay, tomorrow I want 5 ideas about Sugar Mama. And so like we come back the next day with 5 episode ideas for Sugar Mama, and then he will pull out those, okay, I like that one, okay, send me that one. So then he'll have, from our various pitches, he'll have a document with the pitches that he liked. And so from those, then he'll narrow it down and be like, okay, I like this one, and this one. Okay, these are the 3 or whatever. And then eventually he parses it down to the one that we're going to actually write. And so we'll do a synopsis for that one. So it's just a paragraph synopsis, because then that has to get approved by the network and the studio and etc. Like it has to go through different development executives. So we'll pitch ideas, and then the showrunner is just saying yes or no. Every showrunner is different. Our showrunner will tell us like, nope, I don't like that. Like we'll move on. You just have to sort of like roll with it. But we have a sort of dynamic in the room where it's not, nobody gets offended. It's just like, okay, all right, so here's my next idea. You just have to keep pitching. You're a pitching machine. And so you pitch your ideas, then you have a beat sheet. Eventually you'll have something of a beat sheet. And that's just sort of the skeleton of the episode. And so it'll definitely have a cold open. It'll have 3 acts and a tag. That's typically for a comedy. And so we'll have the beat sheet. Then once we sort of know the direction that it's going, then we'll go back and start doing the outline. And that's when we sort of, everything gets more detailed. We'll set the scene with more detail. It's one thing to say, she walked into a room versus she stormed into a room, just as an example. Not that that's the one, but
Got it.
like, you sort of like add more description and the words that you use. And then once we know what the story is, we have that sort of fleshed out. Then it's the pitching the jokes. Everyone piggybacks off of each other, and you just keep doing that forever until you die.
And are you doing the dialogue at the same time as you're pitching these? Okay, got it. Okay.
Yeah. So
And
when you're pitching jokes, a lot of the jokes are going to be delivered as dialogue. And so when you're pitching jokes, it's typically you're pitching dialogue.
Are you kind of nailed to one genre, or is it easy to kind of go between, comedy versus a hospital drama episode, or does that take a different kind of a skill set?
I think in practice, like, storytelling is storytelling. Like, you still need to have, all the elements of the story, regardless of whether it's in 3 acts or 5. So I think in that sense, there are transferable skills. But in practice, like, if you're a comedy writer, like, you're going to be in that lane until you're like big enough where you can be like, oh, I'm going to do something else now, in the vein of like Jordan Peele or Adam McKay. And then again, if you're a drama writer, you're going to stick to drama. I know people who do try to transfer, so to speak, into different genres, and they have a lot of difficulty, and then they end up coming back to their original genre, because a lot of this, again, is relationships and recommendations between people, and if you're a comedy writer, you're probably going to know a lot more comedy people and who know about comedy jobs, and the same thing for drama. So it's it's in that respect, it's harder to do both, but in terms of the practice, I think it's certainly possible to transfer from one to another. I've heard people say, like, if you're in a drama room and you're a comedy writer, you're just the funniest person in the room. Everyone thinks you're hilarious. But if you're in a comedy room and everyone's funny, everybody's just trying to pitch a better joke. So it's less laughter in that sense, because you're like, oh, you're thinking on the spot of something funny. Whereas genre, you have more breath to, like, develop a pitch. I think animation, we're really lucky, because animation doesn't have to be done in person. Live action has a lot bigger of a hurdle to jump over, because physical bodies have to be around each other in order to get that, to execute the show. But animation, the show can go on. And so I think we're lucky in that, like, our, knock on wood, like, our show isn't going to get shut down for a reason that related to COVID, because we can, the animation side, they're all, they're storyboarding, etc. at home, and recording is happening in the actors' homes with their own microphone. So in that sense, animation is safe. But in terms of coming back to work physically in person together, I don't anticipate that happening anytime soon.
Well, do you feel like you've done some of what you set out to do in the beginning, and having that voice for Black and brown people? And do you feel like you've done that?
We sat in a meeting early on, and we started working in the room. We get, like, a lot of presentations with statistics, and we got a statistic that said Black and brown kids from rural areas disproportionately watch more TV than any other demographic. So literally, the work that I'm doing is going to speak primarily to those kids. And so that to me is signifies that I am doing the work I set out to do.
You kind of broke in, in your career, and just kind of hit the ground running and knocked it out the park. What's your advice for someone coming in that wants to be a staff writer or a showrunner?
I actually would recommend taking a class, because then you can build community and you can meet other writers, and then your teacher could my teacher, he actually recommended me to the manager that I have, the literary manager I have. So, like, you don't know, like, if your teacher could then help escalate your career. So I actually think taking a class, even if it's online, can actually be really beneficial, because you build community, and a lot of this is relationships and making friends, and like that, like, really sort of helps people to stay grounded in an industry that's so uncertain.
Ashley, thank you so much. I appreciate a great conversation with you. Look forward, much continued success to you. I'm sure you're going to be doing a lot of things coming up in 2020 and beyond. So please keep us informed of what you're doing, and please be a friend to the show.
Thank you so much.
Be safe.